Thank you for the invitation, Noam. So I'm going, well, maybe to say in a few words that my background is also in art and anthropology, and for my PhD thesis I was working in a politics and government department in Ben Gurion, also intersecting with science and technology studies. And I'm going to share with you some of my work with the balloon and kite photography in conflict areas in Israel-Palestine. So balloon and kite photography, as we know, is not a new thing. It was born in the mid-19th century, right with the invention of photography. And despite the drone boom we're experiencing right now, it hasn't since lost its relevance. And this is because, on the one hand, we are experiencing unprecedented democratization of geospatial information, satellites, digital and online GIS, commercial drones, and on the other hand, digital and material forms of governmental and corporate control over these technologies and the data they allow to produce are powerful and evasive than ever before. So against the backdrop of these recent changes in what we can call the public field of aerial vision, I will discuss the politics of do-it-yourself aerial photography in the fields of human rights as a technique that allows to reconfigure our mechanisms of truth-making in the processes of producing testimonies. I will do so through one case study that focuses on mapping and visualizing indigenous rights in the unrecognized Bedouin village of Al-Araqib in the Negev Desert, south of Israel. So, a quick look, so a few words maybe on the method, which was developed in 2010 by the Public Laboratory for Open Technology and Science. It's an open source community that develops and applies methods for environmental justice exploration, and it advances civic science and community science practices and agenda. Public Lab was a catalyst in making this technique more affordable and simple to use, and I took it from the environmental justice field and applied it in conflict areas. And a quick look into the hardware. Wow, lots of effects you have here.
Colors. You're an artist.
It's not me, it's, you know. It's a simple digital camera, as you can see, that is held inside a rig that is made from a reused plastic bottle. And as you can see, it's a very simple instrument that most of us can quite easily figure out how to build it and how to use it. So the question I want to focus here in this talk is what kind of testimony can be produced with DIY aerial photography? How can kite and balloon photography imagery be considered a testimony, a form of addressing another, an image that creates a public of witnesses, as put forth by Shoshana Feldman and Dori Lau, when it is in fact an image that is distant and disconnected from life on the ground, an image that tends to create disorientation rather than emotional reaction and care. But first, I'll give an initial answer to a recurring question. Why not use satellite imagery? And why not use commercial drones that are becoming increasingly affordable and easy to use? However, the question as I see it is not which technology is better, but what kinds of relations, affect, and impact one wants to achieve through the production of testimonies, and what would best serve particular needs in different political and social and legal contexts. In the Negev project that I'm about to present, we use historical aerials as well as satellite imagery, and we chose to use kite photography rather than drones. And as I would show, besides the advantages of a low-cost instrument and relatively easy to use, which, important to say, doesn't require advanced technological skills, the choice was meant to put an emphasis on the role of embodied and collaborative processes in the production of testimony. From my perspective in this project, we were not only focused on the outcome, the image, the visual evidence, but also on addressing and negotiating power structures and forms of domination that are embedded in technology itself and shape our mechanisms of truth-making, namely deeply challenging a dominant legal professional human rights culture that is practiced and mastered by experts, and doing that by reconfiguring the tools for technoscientific truth-making, their modes of authority and engagement. All this is premised on the broader understanding that satellite imagery, even commercial drones, are fundamentally restricted and regulated by states and corporations who control what we can see, how we can see it, and when we can see it. So, for example, satellite imagery of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories are censored in all available digital platforms such as Google Maps due to agreements between the US and Israel that limits resolution to a maximum of 2.5 square meter per pixel. And this is while publicly available satellite imagery is usually published in 50 to 70 centimeters per pixel. And what you can see here is an image of the Bedouin village Al-Araqib as it is seen in Google Satellite. And this image is a DIY aerial photograph of the same area that was created with residents and activists in a workshop conducted in January 2016 as part of the project Ground Truth, which was led by the Israeli NGO Zochrot and the London-based agency Forensic Architecture. And in contrast to the Google Satellite image we saw earlier, this one presents a resolution of 5 centimeters per pixel. Here you can see more clearly how dense and detailed this image can get, so much as you can count the number and the types of stones that mark each grave. So Al-Araqib, unrecognized village that was populated by more than 500 people, has been demolished more than 130 times by the Israeli authorities since 2010. It has become a symbol of Bedouin resistance to colonization and dispossession through the resilient struggle of a few families who stayed put on their lands and currently living next to the cemetery, which is the only structure that wasn't demolished. So in the case of Al-Araqib, as in another 40 unrecognized Bedouin villages in the Negev, Israel is arguing that before the establishment of the state in 1948, Bedouins were not leading sedentary ways of life in the lands to which they lay claim. And one of the central tools for proving or refuting these claims are historical aerials and maps, looking for signs of settlement and cultivation of land. However, the mark that Bedouins leave on the ground is so delicate and temporal that it might have not been captured at all, because, for example, at the time of the photography, in certain seasons, the lands are not cultivated, or it might have been captured, but the structures are so small that they disappear into the photographic materiality of historic areas. And this is what Eyal Weizman calls the violence at the threshold of detectability, meaning that these images serve the state in denying Bedouin indigenous rights and justifying ongoing evictions and the demolition of structures. Here you can see the scale of the work we have done in the area of Al-Araqib. The balloon kite photography is the color layer. It's covering 5.5 square kilometers of land. We conducted it in we created this in 6 or 7 mapping sessions with Bedouin residents through the course of a year. And forensic architecture composed these kite aerial images into 3D models and overlaid these imageries onto 1945 Royal Air Force aerials, which is the black and white layer. And this is, allows to vividly visualize Bedouin structures such as old stone houses, wells, cisterns, and caves that cannot be clearly identified in historical images. So these low altitude and high quality images enable to challenge the threshold of detectability, to use Weizmann's term, in publicly available imagery, both historical and current. But my argument is that it did more than that. It managed to push against another threshold, an entrenched and deeply accepted threshold of participation. And participation is understood here, following the sociologist Nurtia Maris, as an active force not only for rendering issues public, but also for a much deeper work of renegotiating the relations between politics and knowledge. In the particular case of El Arqib, DIY aerial photography was not simply a solution to the problem of establishing visual proof of Bedouin sedentary presence in El Arqib, but rather it was an attempt to fiddle with the broader contentious battle of truth-making that had been shaped almost exclusively by expert discourse. So the act of collaborative mapping with local activists, including children and women, worked against a high threshold of participation that tends to prevent those who are affected from meaningfully contributing to the production and interpretation of aerial testimonies. It allowed to produce hybrid forms in the production of highly technological testimonies that bring together various local, technological, and scientific expertise. Paradoxically, it can be argued that the DIY view from above, in the context of political conflict and rights violations, connects with performances of mobile witnessing, coined by Carrie Andin Papadopoulos as camera-mediated activism. Camera-mediated witnessing, that she described as the ritualized employment of the mobile camera as a personal witnessing device, facilitating claims to truth by citizens recording their own oppression. While the use of the technique in the case of Al Arqib is far from being as ritualized and networked as mobile cameras are, it cannot be separated from the operation of global networks and the flow of digital information through ICTs. The many examples of do-it-yourself aerial photography in political and environmental activism brings forth a new form of camera-mediated activism that embodies a similarly authoritative record and near real-time testimony created and mediated by the abused. In contrast to networked and crowdsourced forms of aerial or geospatial witnessing, the do-it-yourself aerial testimony shapes an active role for those who are directly affected and suggests a potential mobilization of aerial and satellite testimonies toward a more political and democratized form of witnessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hagit. We have time for one, maybe two questions. Okay, Lina?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you get, you reference the images. Is it a lot of work or?
Okay, so we usually use a very simple camera, so that's true, they don't have GPS. And then when we take the photographs taken in the air and use a software, an open source software and web-based software that was developed also by Public Lab. It's basically part of the kit. It's a software and hardware. And we stitch the images together using this software, then it gets all the metadata, the geographic metadata.
One quick question.
I know very little about the Bedouins in the Negev, but as far as I little know, the country's Israel's sort of claims against the Bedouin claims are much more complex than just some satellite images. In the resolution, there was a lot of historical geography involved, very detailed analysis. Just to balance it, because I think the way presented it is a bit biased to one direction and a bit, in terms of the science, I would prefer to see something a bit more balanced. So just to balance it out, the state of Israel has made huge efforts to collect other records, not just from today's and kites, but what happened over time, and I wouldn't sort of reduce them to nothing. Many very knowledgeable professors and others were involved in this process, so I'm surprised to hear that.
No doubt that there is a lot of information and resources that are involved in the researchers, in the research that is conducted around these issues, but my point was not about the Bedouin issues as much as the use of technology and visualization together with the affected communities, rather than bringing here the whole arguments and definitely contested field of research. I was not going to do that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Irina Shklovsky.